Out on the Kansas cattle road, a stolen mule could wake up an entire town. Men would light lanterns, saddle horses, and ride until dawn for an animal worth $40. But when a girl vanished from a dance hall, most of those same men suddenly remembered they had business elsewhere. That was the way people survived bad towns. They looked away early so they would not have to admit what they saw later. Late August 1879, southwest of Abilene, where the Smoky Hill Trail broke into pale grass and dust, 5 riders were forcing a young woman toward a dry creek bed. One had her by the back of the neck, laughing like the whole thing was a game. The girl was barefoot, bleeding at one heel, her brown dress torn along the sleeve, but she still fought them. She kicked, twisted, clawed at the man holding her, and once nearly broke free before he slammed her down hard enough to drive the breath from her chest. None of the men looked afraid. That was what made it ugly. A man doing wrong for the first time usually glances around. These men did not. Then a horse stopped on the low ridge above them. The rider sitting there was past the age when most men still tried to look dangerous. His beard had gone iron gray, one shoulder sat lower than the other, and the left side of his coat hung oddly, as if an old wound had changed the way he carried himself. But the colt at his hip looked clean, and his eyes did not move like an old man's eyes. They moved like doors closing. The tall rider holding the girl looked up first. His name was Judd Marlowe, and Abilene knew him as a man who could smile while cutting rope, cards, or skin. He grinned when he saw the stranger. "Well now," Judd called, "road's wide enough for you to keep riding." The old rider did not answer. The girl tried to stand again. Judd shoved her down with one boot. That was when the stranger spoke. No one moved. Then one of Judd's men laughed and cocked his shotgun over one arm. "You hard of hearing, Grandpa? This don't concern you." The stranger climbed down from the saddle slowly, not dramatically, not like a man trying to impress anybody, more like a man stepping into weather he had already decided to endure. Judd's smile thinned. "You know who she belongs to?" That word reached the girl before any bullet could have. Belongs. Her face changed. Fear turned into something colder. The stranger noticed that too. "Nobody belongs to a man," he said. Judd spat into the dirt. Church answer for a fellow carrying a gun. One of the younger riders shifted in his saddle. He could not have been more than 19. Scrawny wrists, nervous mouth, eyes that kept sliding away from the girl. He looked like the kind of boy who had followed the wrong men and only just realized wrong men do not let you leave clean. Judd jerked the girl up by her collar. "Search the hem again," he ordered. Voss said she had it sewn in. The word hem changed everything. Not money, not jewelry. Hem. The girl moved too fast. Her right hand clamped against the torn edge of her skirt, protecting something hidden in the stitching. Judd saw it. So did the stranger. Judd lunged. The stranger drew. He was not quick the way dime novels made Gunman quick. His body was too old for that. His right elbow did not rise smoothly, and pain flashed once across his jaw. But he drew without confusion. The first shot cut Judd's hat brim in half, and took a strip of skin from his ear. The second shot knocked the shotgun out of another man's hands before the barrel came level. The prairie cracked open with noise. The girl dropped flat. One rider cursed and reached for his revolver. The stranger stepped sideways, fired low, and the man screamed as his boot heel split and his horse shied beneath him. Then a fourth man rushed from the ground with a knife. The stranger did not shoot him. He caught the wrist, turned it hard enough to make the man fold, and drove the Colt's steel grip into his cheekbone. The knife vanished in the grass. Now no one was laughing. Judd stood half-bent, one hand pressed to his bleeding ear. His eyes were no longer amused. They were measuring. The old rider had left 3 men alive on purpose. That frightened Judd more than killing would have. "You just bought yourself more trouble than you can spend," Judd said. The stranger kept the gun low, not pointed at anyone, unless it needed to be. "Ride back and tell your buyer the price went up." The young rider swallowed hard. "Judd," he muttered, "we got no call to die over a tag." The stranger heard that. Tag. The girl's face tightened. Judd turned just enough to glare at the boy. "Shut your mouth." But the damage was done. The stranger looked at the girl's clenched hand and saw the edge of a small brass disc peeking from the ripped seam of her dress. It was no bigger than a silver dollar, dark with sweat and prairie dust, with a bit of frayed red thread tied through one punched hole. A freight tag, or something made to look like one. Judd saw the stranger notice it. His hand twitched toward his gun again. The stranger fired once more. This time the bullet struck the dirt between Judd's boots and lifted dust into his face. Next one is not a warning. The whole prairie seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Judd stepped backward. He motioned with 2 fingers. His men climbed awkwardly onto their horses. The one with the ruined boot had to be pulled up by the nervous boy. Only the boy looked back at the girl before leaving, not with kindness exactly, with shame. Then the 5 riders turned north, their horses throwing dust into the yellow light until the trail swallowed them. The girl stayed on the ground, arms locked around herself, till the trail swallowed them. The girl stayed on the ground, arms locked around herself. The stranger holstered his Colt. "You hurt bad?" "Don't come near me," she whispered. So he stopped. That was the first thing she noticed about him. Most men heard no and treated it like a negotiation. He heard it and obeyed. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind combing the dry grass. Then the brass tag slipped fully from the torn seam and landed between them. The stranger bent and picked it up before the dust could cover it. On one side were shipping marks. Black Star Freight, a number filed almost smooth. On the other side, scratched through tarnish by a knife point, were 4 words. Pawnee Fork Road, May 1864. Beneath that were 2 initials, L.M. The stranger went still. The girl saw the blood drain from his face. "What is it?" she asked. He did not answer right away. For 15 years he had carried one memory so long it had turned into bone. A wagon road near Pawnee Fork, a broken stage, 3 dead men, 1 little sister gone without a grave. Lucy May Merritt had been 7 years old when the prairie swallowed her. 15 years later, this barefoot girl was carrying a brass tag marked with the same road, the same month, and the same initials. The stranger closed his hand around the tag carefully, as if it might burn him. The girl pushed herself up on shaking legs. "I said, what is it?" He looked toward the dust where the riders had disappeared, then back at her. "Trouble," he said, "more than those 5 men brought." She stared at him, trying to decide if he was another trap wearing a kinder face. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. That hesitation told him she had used more than one. "Nell," she said at last. "Nell Calder." Is that the name they gave you? Her eyes sharpened. It is the one I am using. Fair answer. The stranger handed the tag back to her, flat on his palm, letting her choose whether to take it. Snatched it and tucked it away. He nodded toward his horse. Abilene 6 miles. They will come back after dark. I can walk. You can barely stand. I said I can walk. He looked at the blood at her heel, then at the trail, then at the sinking sun. Then ride. I'll walk. That answer confused her more than kindness would have. But after a minute, she climbed into the saddle. The old man took the reins and started north on foot. They reached Abilene near sundown. From a distance, the town looked almost respectable. Lamps glowing, church steeple dark against the red sky, music leaking from saloons, stockyard smell riding the evening wind. Men laughing like laughter could make a place clean. The stranger led the horse away from Texas Street and into a narrow lane behind a boarding house with peeling green shutters. A widow named Ruth Bell opened the door with a flour sack still tied around her waist. She took one look at Nell, then at the stranger's dusty coat and the blood on his knuckles. "Caleb Merritt," she said. "Every time you visit, some floor of mine gets ruined." The girl's eyes flicked to him. Caleb. So he did have a name. "Evening, Ruth," he said. "That is not an explanation." "No," he answered. "It is shorter." Ruth sighed and pulled the door open wider. Inside, the boarding house smelled of coffee, wood smoke, and old soap. Ruth sat Nell in the kitchen and set a cup in front of her, sweetened so heavily it might have been meant for a child. Nell wrapped both hands around it, but did not drink. Caleb stayed by the window. Ruth noticed the bruising at Nell's wrists, old bruises under new ones. Her face changed, not with surprise, with recognition. "Red Finch?" Ruth asked quietly. Nell lowered her eyes. Caleb turned from the window. The saloon? Saloon, dance hall, boarding house, if a man says it politely. Ruth set her jaw. Girls go in looking for kitchen work. They come out with debts no honest wage can pay. Nell reached into her dress scene and pulled out the brass tag. "I took this from Elias Voss's counting room," she said. At the name, Ruth stopped moving. Even the stove seemed to go quiet. Caleb knew Voss by reputation. A freight broker with clean cuffs, a soft voice, and half the town's important men owing him favors. Men like Voss did not threaten in alleys. They bought the alley, then sent someone else. Nell placed the tag on the table. "There were more," she said. "A whole drawer. Tags, bills, names. Some scratched out, some marked as moved." "Moved where?" Ruth asked. "West? South? I don't know." Nell's voice tightened. "After midnight. They told everyone the girls ran off with drovers, or married, or stole money. But the names were in Voss's drawer." Caleb picked up the tag again. The words Pawnee Fork Road sat there in weak lamplight. May 1864. L.M. His little sister had been named Lucy May. He had told himself for years that initials were a poor substitute for truth, but grief was never reasonable. It reached for anything shaped like a door. Ruth watched him carefully. "Caleb?" Before he could answer, horses passed outside. 3 of them. Slow. Too slow for travelers. Caleb lowered the lamp wick with 2 fingers. Ruth blew out the kitchen candle. Darkness folded itself across the room. Nell stopped breathing. Boots creaked on the porch. A knock came. Not loud. Official. Ruth wiped her hands on her apron, crossed the hall, and opened the door halfway. Deputy Wade Harlan stood beneath the porch light, with his hat pushed back and sweat darkening his collar. His badge was pinned straight, which somehow made him look less honest. "Evening, Mrs. Bell," he said. "Evening. Folks heard shooting south of town. Folks hear lots of things when whiskey is cheap." Harlan smiled, but his eyes moved past Ruth into the kitchen. They found Nell. For 1 second his face betrayed him. Not surprise that she was alive. Concern that someone else had seen her alive. Caleb marked it. Good men looked relieved when a missing girl turned up breathing. Bad lawmen started counting witnesses. Harlan's gaze drifted from Nell to the table. The brass tag lay beside the coffee cup. His throat worked once. "You people ought to be careful," he said. "A girl from the Red Finch can make trouble for anyone helping her." Caleb stepped into the hallway just enough for the deputy to see him. "Is that law?" Caleb asked, "or friendly advice?" Harlan looked at the Colt on Caleb's hip. "Depends who has to hear it." No one spoke. Then Harlan touched the brim of his hat and backed off the porch. Followed him into the dark. Ruth shut the door and barred it. Nell's hands had started shaking again. "He knows," she whispered. Caleb looked at the brass tag. "He was more worried about that than you." No one slept after that. Abilene did what towns do when the wicked work late. It kept music playing. A piano rattled somewhere on Texas Street. Men shouted over cards. A woman laughed too loudly. The stock pens groaned with cattle turning in the dark. Inside Ruth Bell's kitchen, the truth sat on the table and made the room feel smaller. Caleb finally asked, "Why take the tag?" Nell gave a humorless little smile. "At first, to buy my way out. If Voss wanted it bad enough, maybe he would let me go. And then I saw the names." She stared into the coffee. One girl was 12. Ruth made a small sound under her breath. Nell swallowed. "I thought if someone outside that place knew, maybe—" She stopped. "I don't know what I thought. People in towns always say they would help if they had proof. Then, when you bring proof, they ask whether the proof is polite enough." That landed hard because it was true. Caleb sat across from her. "What happened at Pawnee Fork?" The question came from Nell, not him. He did not answer quickly. Some memories had to be lifted carefully, like glass from a wound. "Stage robbery," he said. "May 1864. My father was moving freight between Fort Larned and the settlements. The stage carried 3 men, a driver, and my little sister. Raiders hit it near a dry bend in the road. By the time I found the wagon, the men were dead and Lucy was gone." "How old were you?" "Old enough to remember I should have been there." Ruth's face softened, but she did not interrupt. Nell's fingers moved to her right palm. Her thumb pressed hard against the base of her ring finger, rubbing a little circle into the skin. Caleb saw it and forgot how to breathe for a moment. Lucy had done that as a child when storms came. A small habit, a useless thing to anyone else, a holy thing to a brother. Nell noticed him watching and pulled her hand away. "What?" "Nothing. Don't lie soft. It is worse than lying hard." That almost made Ruth smile. Caleb leaned back. My sister rubbed her palm that way. Nell went very still. "I am not your ghost," she said. "No. I am not anybody's proof. No. I do not need one more man deciding what my name means." Caleb nodded once. That answer seemed to calm her more than argument would have. Then glass broke somewhere near the parlor. Caleb was on his feet before the sound finished. Ruth reached for the shotgun above the pantry door. 2 men came through the back entrance. Finished. Ruth reached for the shotgun above the pantry door. 2 men came through the back entrance. The first carried a revolver low. The second had a burlap sack in one hand and a knife in the other. as if Nell were livestock to be thrown over a saddle. Caleb fired once. The revolver man spun backward into the wash stand, gun clattering across the floor. The knife man lunged for Nell. She froze for half a heartbeat. Then she grabbed the coffee pot from the stove and flung it into his face. Boiling coffee hit him across the eyes. He howled and stumbled blind. Ruth stepped in with a shotgun and drove the butt into his stomach, hard enough to fold him. The man fell across the kitchen boards, retching. Smoke from Caleb's pistol drifted in the lamplight. Nell stood shaking, one hand still extended from the throw. She looked almost astonished by her own body. Caleb glanced at her. Good aim. I was aiming for his mouth. Better aim. Ruth tied the men with clothesline, while muttering things a churchwoman would not have approved of. Caleb crouched in front of the conscious one and pressed the cold barrel of the Colt under his chin. Judd Marlowe sent you? The man spat coffee and blood. Voss did. Finch. For Nell? For the tag. His eyes slid toward the table. Voss says no girl matters if the tag is gone. Caleb's jaw tightened. What is in the drawer? The man laughed once, then stopped when Ruth lifted the shotgun. Bills, receipts, a black ledger, routes. He swallowed. Names of men who paid, names of lawmen who looked away. Ruth went pale. Nell whispered, The ledger is still there. In Voss's office, the man said. Upstairs. Locked cabinet. A new knock struck the front door. Everyone turned. Caleb moved to the side of the hall. Ruth raised the shotgun. Nell picked up the fallen revolver with both hands, even though it was too heavy for her grip. United States Marshal, a voice called. Asa Teague, I am not with Voss. Caleb opened the door with the Colt hidden behind his leg. The man on the porch wore a long trail coat and a federal badge dulled by dust. He had a face made of weather and tired patience. His eyes moved over the broken glass, the tied men, Ruth's shotgun, Nell's torn dress, and the brass tag on the table. Looks like I should have come before supper, he said. Ruth snorted. Everyone says that after they miss the shooting. Marshal Teague stepped inside and removed his hat. I have been tracking missing girls from Junction City to Santa Fe for 4 months, he said. Every witness disappears. Every file gets misplaced. Every local deputy suddenly forgets how paper works. Caleb handed him the brass tag. Teague studied it under the lamp. His expression hardened. Black Star Freight. You know it? Caleb asked. I know it is not freight. It is a mask. Teague turned the tag. These numbers match transfer stops. The scratched initials mark origin. The road name tells where the person was first taken. Nell's face went white. Person, Ruth said quietly. Teague looked at Nell. Voss has been moving women under freight covers, sometimes by wagon, by cattle rail. If he thinks this tag is loose, he will burn every record by morning. What do you need? Caleb asked. The ledger, Nell answered before anyone else could. I know where he keeps it. Ruth turned sharply. No. Nell kept her eyes on the Marshal. The office key hangs behind the liquor shelves. He thinks the girls cannot read labels, so he hides important things beside expensive bottles. Teague looked at Caleb. There will be 8 men inside at least, more if Judd called his friends. Caleb checked the rounds in his Colt. Then we should avoid a fair fight. Ruth sighed. I hate how often men say that right before ruining furniture. Nell stood. I am going. No, Ruth said. They know me there. Get upstairs if the front room is busy. Caleb studied her for a long second. He did not see a rescued girl anymore. He saw someone standing at the edge of her own terror, deciding whether to walk through it. You sure? He asked. No, Nell said. but fear has made enough decisions for me. Nobody found a better argument. Near 2 a.m, Abilene changed faces. The family streets went dark. The cattle streets brightened. Lanterns burned red and gold over saloon doors. Music staggered into the road. Drunk drovers leaned against hitching posts. Somewhere, a man sang badly enough to offend the horses. The red finch stood at the corner of Texas Street and Cedar, 3 stories high, painted a respectable cream color that fooled no one who had ever watched the back door. Caleb and Teague stopped in the alley across from it. Ruth waited with the horses behind the livery, shotgun across her lap like a knitting basket. Nell stood between Caleb and the Marshal, wearing Ruth's spare shawl over her torn dress. The brass tag was tied inside her sleeve now, not hidden where Voss would expect it. Caleb handed her a small, unloaded derringer. Her eyes narrowed. I know it is empty. Good. Then why give it to me? Because sometimes a hand needs weight before a heart remembers it has weight too. She looked at him strangely. That is either wise or foolish. Most things are. Teague checked the street. I draw men from the front. Caleb goes in after the noise. Nell takes the back stair, gets the ledger, meets Ruth by the livery. And if Voss catches me? Nell asked. Caleb did not answer with comfort. Then make him regret touching the door. That answer steadied her more than comfort would have. Inside the Red Finch, the world smelled of cigar smoke, spilled beer, perfume, and money that had been handled by too many cruel hands. Cards slapped tables, boots hammered floorboards. A piano man played like he owed somebody a debt. Elias Voss stood near the upstairs rail in a gray vest, clean as a surgeon. He had silver hair, soft hands, and eyes that looked at people the way shopkeepers looked at inventory. Judd Marlowe sat below him near the bar, one ear bandaged, one smile missing. Caleb walked through the swinging doors first. The room did not go quiet all at once. It quieted in pieces. A card player stopped mid-bet. A woman at the piano looked down. Judd saw Caleb and rose slowly. Well, Judd said. The old dog followed the scent. Caleb leaned one elbow on the bar. I was hoping you would be prettier by lamplight. A few drunk men laughed before they understood they should not. Judd's hand dropped toward his revolver. That was when Teague stepped through the front door, wearing his federal badge in the open. Evening, the marshal called. Everyone stay where your mothers would be ashamed to find you. Confusion rolled across the room. Nell slipped through the back entrance, carrying a tray of clean glasses, head down, shawl pulled low. No one noticed another girl moving through smoke. First ugly truth the Red Finch had taught her. Invisible could be a prison. Tonight, it would be a weapon. She reached the liquor shelves and found the key where she said it would be, hanging behind a bottle of French brandy Voss never let customers buy. Above the main room, Voss's office door waited at the end of a narrow hall. Downstairs, Judd drew. Caleb moved first, not with youth, but with certainty. He knocked the whiskey glass off the bar into Judd's eyes, stepped inside the draw, and drove his elbow into Judd's throat. Judd staggered backward, firing wild into the ceiling. The saloon exploded into panic. Teague fired once into the chandelier chain. The fixture crashed down in sparks and glass, scattering men from the center of the room without killing them. Federal law, he shouted. Drop iron or lose the hand holding it. Some listened. Bad men rarely did. 2 of Judd's riders overturned a table and started shooting. Caleb rolled behind the bar as bullets chewed bottles above him. Whiskey rained down his coat. He came up through the glittering shards and fired twice. One gunman dropped his weapon and screamed over a broken wrist. The other took Teague's rifle shot through the shoulder and spun into a card table. Upstairs, Nell reached the office. Hands shook so badly she missed the lock twice. "Breathe," she whispered to herself. "Look for the way out before you look at the fear." The key turned. Inside, the room was lamplit and neat. A roll-top desk, a map of rail connections, a locked cabinet under a framed painting of a prairie sunrise. Nell hated the painting most. It looked peaceful hanging above so much evil. She grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace and smashed the cabinet lock until the wood split. The black ledger sat inside. Beside it was a bundle of brass tags tied with red thread, dozens of them. Nell pressed one hand to her mouth. Each tag was a life made small enough to hide in a drawer. Then the office door clicked behind her. Elias Voss stood in the doorway with a small pistol in his gloved hand. He looked disappointed, not angry. That frightened her more. "Nell," he said softly, "you were always clever in the wrong direction." She clutched the ledger against her chest. "Move." Voss smiled. "You still think that book makes you powerful. It does not. Paper only matters when men agree to read it." Downstairs, Caleb heard the shot before he saw where it came from. A pistol crack from above. He looked toward the stairway. Judd saw the look and grinned through blood. "Stairs with him, ain't she?" Caleb hit him with the Colt hard enough to end the sentence. Then he started for the stairs. His bad leg failed on the third step. Pain shot up through the old wound near his hip, sudden and white. He caught the rail, cursed under his breath, and pulled himself upward while gunfire hammered the room below. In the office, Voss stepped closer. "Give me the ledger." "No." He tilted his head. "You think Marshal Teague can protect you? You think Caleb Merritt can? Men grow old. Records burn. Witnesses forget. Fear is the only system that never misses payroll." Nell backed toward the window. "You are wrong. About fear? About witnesses." She lifted her sleeve and showed him the brass tag. Not the one from his drawer. The old one. Pawnee Fork Road, May 1864. L.M. For the first time that night, Voss lost his polished calm. His eyes snapped to the tag. You should not have that. Nell understood then. He knew exactly what it was. Voss raised the pistol. The office window shattered inward. Marshal Teague had climbed the outside stair to the balcony and fired through the glass. Not at Voss, but at the lamp above his shoulder. Darkness and flame burst together. Voss flinched. Nell moved. She slammed the black ledger, edge first, into his wrist. The pistol fired into the wall. She hit him again, this time across the mouth, and Voss crashed backward against the desk. Caleb reached the doorway just as Voss scrambled for the gun. One tired kick sent the pistol skidding under the cabinet. Voss looked up and saw the Colt pointed at him. For once, the man who owned everybody's fear had none left to spend. "Do you know who I am?" Voss whispered. Caleb's face was stone. "I know what you are." That was all he gave him. By dawn, the Red Finch no longer sounded like a saloon. It sounded like a building learning shame. Women came out wrapped in blankets. Some cried. By dawn, the Red Finch no longer sounded like a saloon. It sounded like a building learning shame. Women came out wrapped in blankets. Some cried. Some stared at the street as if daylight itself was suspicious. Teague's deputies arrived from the rail office with warrants and hard faces. Judd Marlowe sat tied to a hitching post with one swollen eye and both hands bound. Deputy Wade Harlan was caught before sunrise behind the telegraph office, with a carpet bag full of cash and 2 unsigned rail passes. Ruth Bell brought coffee in a tin pot, and handed it out to women who had forgotten what kindness looked like when it came without a price. Nell sat on the red finch steps with the black ledger in her lap. Caleb stood nearby, too tired to pretend his leg did not hurt. Teague opened the ledger on a crate and read silently. Names, dates, payments, transfer stops, sheriff's favors, freight covers. Enough proof to break men from Abilene to the territorial line. Then Nell found a folded paper tucked in the back cover. It was brittle with age and sealed under a smear of old wax. She opened it carefully. A child's intake note. Female, about 7. Taken near Pawnee Fork Road. May 1864. Marked as L.M. Sold under new name to Black Star labor agent, then transferred through Fort Harker records. At the bottom was a second note, written years later in Voss's narrow hand. Girl renamed Nell Calder. Memory uncertain. Keep separated from older manifests. The street blurred. Nell did not notice she was crying until the paper shook in her hands. Ruth covered her mouth. Teague looked away, giving grief the only privacy a street could offer. Caleb stood very still. For 15 years he had imagined finding Lucy 100 different ways. A grave under buffalo grass, a ribbon caught in a fence, rumor from a dying man, a child's Bible in a burned wagon. He had never imagined finding her alive on the steps of a place that tried to sell her twice. Nell looked up at him. "I don't remember you," she whispered. Caleb swallowed. "I know. I don't remember being Lucy. I know." Her voice broke. "What if I am only Nell?" Caleb's face changed then, not with disappointment, with mercy. "Then Nell is who I will know." That was the sentence that reached her. Not sister, not proof, not miracle. Choice. For the first time since the creek bed, Nell let someone touch her. She reached out first. Caleb took her hand like it was something breakable and sacred. A brass tag lay between them on the step, catching the new sun. Small thing, ugly thing, a number meant to erase a person, but in the end it had done the one thing Voss never meant it to do. It had remembered her. By noon, Elias Voss was in irons. By evening, the Red Finch was locked under federal seal. In the weeks that followed, the ledger sent businessmen running, deputies lying, and freight clerks suddenly eager to confess. Some missing women were found alive in towns along the rail line. Some were not. That is the hard truth of old stories and real wounds. Justice often arrives late, sometimes limping, sometimes carrying only part of what was lost. It still matters when it arrives, because evil like Voss's does not survive on guns alone. It survives on lowered eyes, quiet rooms, men who say they heard nothing, women told their fear is inconvenient, towns that protect a mule faster than a daughter. That summer near Abilene, one frightened young woman stole a brass tag from a drawer because she was tired of disappearing on paper. One tired rider stopped on a ridge because he had already spent 15 years regretting the road he was not on. And one town learned, too late and just in time, that the smallest piece of proof can become heavier than a gun when somebody finally refuses to let it stay buried. The strangest part was this. Merritt was dangerous because he carried a Colt. Elias Voss thought Nell Calder was dangerous because she carried a ledger. They were both wrong. Caleb was dangerous because he still cared after loss should have hollowed him out. Nell was dangerous because fear had held her so long it forgot people can learn the shape of their chains, and when they finally do, they stop asking permission to break them. That is why the story lasted, not because an old gunman won a fight, not because a wicked man went to jail, but because a girl who had been turned into a number found her name again. And the man who thought hope was dead learned that sometimes, after 15 years of dust, grief still knows the road home.